Okay, hi everyone. My name is Dovid Meshchaninov. I'm a licensed trauma therapist. I'm based out here in California, in Los Angeles, but I work with individuals and different clients locally and long distance as well. So I'm really excited to talk about tonight our topic. It's really a great topic and it's going to be really informative. So I'm really excited to be able to go through with you guys today the topic that we chose for tonight, titled Using IFS, which stands for Internal Family Systems. Using that model to help understand your emotions better, to help you understand how you work as a human being, and how to see a path for healing, a path for trauma healing. And it's really going to, if we can stick with it, there's going to be a lot of information that I want to get through, but it can really give a clear understanding of understanding a lot of how we work as people and what we can do to begin working with it. And if we stick with me, I think there will be some really cool tips and ways that we can, using the IFS model, to really do great work. So let me just introduce myself quickly one more time as people are joining, and then we'll jump right into it. So again, my name is Dovid Meshchaninov. I'm a trauma therapist, and I love helping people heal their developmental trauma, the trauma that they got, particularly as they're developing from childhood, that, as we know, carries with people throughout their life and affects them in all different ways, and using different ways like somatic techniques and EMDR and also IFS. So tonight we're going to speak about IFS. Again, that's Internal Family Systems, developed by Richard Schwartz. And we're going to lay it all out, some of the main points of it, to really help you begin to understand yourself and see some tips, as we said, we're going to get to for healing. So let's go. The way this story starts, the way, like many stories of healing and trauma, as you could say, it starts in childhood. So imagine a child who's young, right? Who's totally dependent on its caregivers, who's in an environment that is hurting it. So let's say it's being an environment where it's being caused emotional pain, right? Maybe it's being not taken care of by its caregivers, this child. Maybe it's being hurt by a sibling or a parent, maybe physically, emotionally, verbally. Obviously, those are like very clear kind of traumas when they're being overtly being hurt physically, emotionally, verbally. But it could even be more subtle than that. But the point is that there's a pain that this child is experiencing, this young little being that's just trying to find its way in this world. And oftentimes, that pain is too much for it to figure out what to do with or how to process, right? Like, if that child was going to be going through this experience now as an adult, it would be very different for it. But now, as a child it's experiencing this when it's totally helpless and dependent on its caregivers. So again, this is going to be the first step of IFS to understand this process. So what the child needs to do in those moments when it's feeling that kind of pain, it develops certain strategies to help it cope, to help it manage. And these, are commonly known as like coping strategies. So let's touch in together. Let's say one very famous one, which is emotional numbing, right? So if you think you have this child that's it's experiencing all this pain or some degree of pain that's more than it knows how to handle. And so what should it do? So a part of it, and in IFS we'll call it a protector part, will come and help it adapt, help it develop a part of it that learns to emotionally numb itself, to emotionally shut itself down. So now it's not feeling that pain that it was feeling till now as harshly, right? Because it's developed a part, you could think of it like an armor, or it's some part of it, maybe it learned to close its heart, so it's not feeling the pain as much. So that's a strategy. That the child again was at first feeling this pain, and it wasn't able to process it. So unconsciously it starts to develop ways how to manage it. So I said you can think of that process where now it learns to numb itself. Now it learns to numb itself emotionally. That's a part that it learned. It's like a protector part that's coming to help it. And there's another term in IFS called managers. You can just think about it that's another term for the same thing, like a protector that now is helping this child figure out how to go through the world so it's not going to get as hurt. Let's take a second just to let some of those words land. And then I'll give you a couple more examples. So here's another example. Let's think of a child who wasn't maybe getting attention in their home. They weren't being made to feel like they're valuable. They weren't made to feel like they're special. So that's a very deep wound. That's what I want you to hear. This kind of childhood wound is very deep and very real. And then what the child might do, what a part of him might develop was like, okay, well, if I become very successful in life, if I become, can make a lot of money, then I'll matter. Then I will be seen. Then maybe I won't be ignored. So that's called this part that's now pushing this person to say, I need to become very successful, or I need to, that's to an unhealthy degree, maybe become like a workaholic. That's coming, as you could call it, a protector or manager part that's trying to help this deeper pain. Or let's give a third example of a protector or manager. Let's say, again, a child, when he was young, it wasn't feeling safe. Maybe things weren't predictable. Maybe, again, there was some kind of emotional abuse or verbal, or maybe being hit by siblings or parents. So now it develops a part of it, we could call it a hypervigilance part, that it's always watching, always being on guard. And that makes total sense, right? That makes total sense. that it would develop such a part. Because it needed to develop certain tools to help it manage what it was going through, manage that difficult situation. But I want you to hear, and this is going to be important for the model, to see that there was the child, and then it developed different parts of it. It said maybe a numbing part, as we said a few moments ago, so it doesn't feel the pain as much. Maybe a very ambitious part, so it doesn't feel like it's worthless. Or maybe a vigilant part. And now I'm going to give you two more terms to help in the model. So that original part of you that was feeling that pain in IFS is called your exile. So why is it called an exile? Because an exile is something that we push away, we don't really deal with. It's sort of ignored, it's like exiled. Like imagine if someone is exiled out of their home or out of their country. So oftentimes, this original pain of, let's say, that emotional pain that was feeling is exiled, and then the person is just using their defenses. They're just using their defenses. Let's say they learn to become emotionally numb. So now they just use that defense to go through the world, or they learn to be hypervigilant. And all that is there to protect themselves from ever having to feel that pain. So people get very good at these defenses. Again, it can mean being vigilant, it can be being very studious, it can be reading people very well so you can pick up on threats. And I want you to hear there's nothing wrong for us to develop these survival strategies or these defenses, but to see that a lot of time, what oftentimes happens is that the original pain gets forgotten about. And we're using these as a way so that pain never comes up again. The way Richard Schwartz explains it, it's like you're trying to do your best going through the world for that sore spot not to be poked. So let's say he said if as a child it felt you were feeling a lot of emotional pain, so you're going to put up this numbness, so as you go through different hardships, you won't feel it won't feel as painful because you have an unconscious memory of how painful that was and was too much. And now we're going to add one more term to help us with our journey, and then I'll review it. The last term is called a firefighter. So think of a firefighter. A firefighter comes when there's a fire, and its main job is to put out the fire. Even if it has to break a window, even if it has to break a door, it has to put down a fire. So what happens if as a person is doing their best, let's say they're an adult now, they're doing their best, they built all these defenses, and they're doing their best for their deep pain not to get triggered. They built up, so let's say this emotional numbness. So that's their protection, right, that they're going through the world with, or their hypervigilance. But let's say something, as we know in life often does, it's impossible, even someone with strong defenses going through life and how complex it is, something will get through. So let's say something does get through that triggers them emotionally, despite them trying to be more numb. Or let's say that person who's trying to be so successful, let's say they lose their job. Suddenly, this young part that was so wounded that needed to put up these walls is vulnerable. This pain is coming back because its only tool was to be successful. Now it lost its job. So what comes in IFS it's called a firefighter. A firefighter tries to soothe this pain in whatever way necessary. So it may be that it will push someone to do something that they wouldn't generally do. Maybe suddenly the firefighter will say, okay, go use a substance. Like go get drunk on alcohol or go gamble. Or something that they may regret later. But the psyche, this part of them that's the firefighter, is trying to do their best to put out the fire. So the individual, as we said, generally is going through life with their tools that they develop so they don't have to deal with this pain. But now something came through. So the firefighter will come in and it feels like it's going to do whatever necessary to try to help. And as you can hear, obviously, it may end up making more of a mess. But in order to help it, you truly have to understand what it's trying to do, that's trying to help. So let's say, as I said, something came through and suddenly a person falls into a huge depression, or even at times suicidal ideation could be a sign of a firefighter. Like, okay, it's better off we shouldn't exist anymore. Because what happened, that original pain got triggered and the protectors or managers that we usually had weren't able to work. So now this part of us is saying, okay, so now we have to either maybe do something rash, maybe, maybe use a substance, maybe, as I said, maybe means we have to self-harm, something like, it could be along those lines. So let me review it again, and then we'll get to some more insights and tools how to work with this. And I know we're talking a lot, and it's a lot in one half an hour to try to share all about the whole model, but I think we'll be able to get through a really good amount. So let's just review and then we'll continue. So we're saying there's the original child. Sometimes it could be an adolescent wounding, but oftentimes a child wounding. And that wound is too much for the person to bear, and that wound becomes called the exile. And then the person develops different coping strategies that are called protectors or managers. And that could be being numb. As we said, that could be needing to be very successful. That could be needing to be very loud. That could be needing to be very vigilant. And all these are trying to help them so that that pain that they were feeling, if they were, again, feeling not safe, so now the vigilance is there to try to help them feel safe. And all that is there to help them go through the world. And then as we're saying, at times, something would get through, something will happen. Maybe they were vigilant, but something suddenly happened that's making them feel unsafe. And then at times a firefighter could come up, which is a part of them that feels very irrational. And it says, well, you just have to do anything to get away from this pain. That's a good way to describe the firefighter. You have to do anything to get away from this pain because it feels so scared of the person having to be in that pain again. Okay. So again, that's exiles is the child part, the protectors and managers are the defenses that we create, and then the firefighter is the part that's trying to get us anything not to feel that pain. So now let's go deeper into the model, how to begin understanding it. So the first thing I want to share, and this is one of the things that I love about IFS, and is so special about it, is to start seeing yourself that there are no bad parts. And that's such a special sentence to say, that there are no bad parts inside of us. So what does that mean? It means, going on what I just said, let's say you have a part that's a firefighter part that's at times when you're triggered saying it wants you just to go drink alcohol. So at first it can feel that part of you, it doesn't make any sense. Let's say you've drunk alcohol before and it always ends badly. You could think, why is there a part of me that's compelling me to go do that? Or maybe a self-harm part, or even a suicidal part. Why is it doing that? But if you could hear that it's coming in your psyche, the way it developed is that there's a part of you that's feeling we have to get away from the pain at any cost, then it makes sense why there will be a part of you that's trying to help you get away from the pain. And of course, down the road, we can help it and see maybe there's another way that we can help you get away from the pain. We can help you ultimately see that there's a way we can help that exile without having to run away from it or numb from it. But the first step in IFS is that it's a non-combative model. It's starting to see that all the parts of you are there for a reason. Okay? So as I just said, even a firefighter part that seems it's just creating chaos, it's maybe if a person is cutting themselves and that just seems to be destructive, it feels that ultimately this is what the person needs. Or let's go with the managers also. Let's say there's a part of oneself that's very hypervigilant, and now they don't sleep well, or their whole nervous system is out of whack. And they want to tell themselves, how come I just can't calm down? How come I can't just chill out? But if you can first appreciate that it's there because it felt that you weren't safe and it needed to develop to keep you safer, then suddenly you can look at it with the different eyes instead of just something that's annoying you. Or let's say you have a part that makes you emotionally numb, as we've been saying in this example, and maybe it's affecting your relationship, so you can't connect to your spouse or the people or your kids the way you want. You're like, what's wrong with me? But if you can see in a non-combative way that all the parts of us develop for a reason, and they're all there trying to help, then we can start engaging with them in a much more effective way and a much less combative way. So we're not inside hating parts of ourselves. We're saying, I hate that I'm like this, that I have to always get perfect A's, or I hate that I'm shut down, or I hate that I'm so vigilant. You can start to understand that these parts are there, and then you can start to work with them. Let me give you a few other beginning points from IFS of how to begin working with ourselves and doing the healing. Another important piece, besides, as we said, seeing that there are no bad parts and trying to get the sense that everything developed for a reason, as we've been showing, is coming from the place of self. So what does that mean? So in IFS, they say there's the self with the capital S, which is you. It's the part of you that can observe all what's inside you. And it's a very special, almost like soul-like quality that a person has. It's a little subtle, it can be a little subtle to explain, but let's say someone's feeling anger. So if you can take a moment and close your eyes and step back and notice that inside of you is a feeling of anger. So the you that's noticing that anger is the self. And that's so important. That's what we want to be working on with IFS. Because let's say you're just feeling angry, and you're just like, I'm angry, and you're in a triggered state, then you can't help that anger right now. You can't help that part inside you feel taken care of. You can't help it feel understood. You can't help it calm down. So in IFS, it's called unblending. Instead of being stuck in the emotion, if you can find a way to step back and notice it. And here's another tip. If you can even say a tip to unblend is to say, I notice there's a part of me that's feeling very angry right now. I notice there's a part of me that feels very much it needs to be vigilant. Or I notice there's a part of me that feels very shut down and numb. just starting to use that language of there's a part of me can see that you are not that. And you can look at that part objectively. And you can look at it with kindness and just try to help it. And here where another thing develops, another beautiful part of IFS, that there are certain clues to know when you are in your self energy, and that now you can start connecting and helping doing the emotional work inside. So if when you look at, let's say there's an angry part inside you or a vigilant part, if you can look at it with a sense of compassion, you're just like, wow, there's a part of me that's really angry, or wow, there's a part of me that's so vigilant, like I feel for that, I want to help it. Then you can know you're in self energy. And then the next steps can unfold, which we may, I guess, have to get to in another time. So if you have, and I'll give you a few words you can write down, and they can be helpful, that give you a clue that you're in self-energy. So if you're feeling compassion towards the part, if you have a sense of patience for the part, if you have a sense of acceptance for the part, a sense of curiosity, a sense of calm. So meaning this part can be angry and you're just noticing it. It doesn't have to trigger you. So when you're in that kind of energy, you're noticing the part, you're maybe feeling you're curious about it, you want to help it, a sense of compassion. Now you know you're in self-energy. Another way to say it is because if you're in the emotion, then now it's overtaking you. An example I like to give, it's like two people could be going skiing down a mountain, but one person isn't in control. So they're just flying down. That's like when the emotion is overtaking you. Then you can't really help it. But if you're going down the mountain, so you can be feeling the emotion very strongly, but you're in control, meaning you're noticing it, then you can work with it. So let's just summarize this part. Then once you understand the model, so again, understanding that you want to come from self, so where you're a little bit outside of the emotion, and you can try to observe it. And then ultimately, even when we'll get to speaking about how to deal with those deep pains, that childhood pain, realizing you can observe that there may be a very scared or tender part inside of you. And this self can notice that and can hold that. And to trust, this is another beautiful point from IFS, that the self has the capacity to process any pain that you have inside. However deep that exiled part that it feels, oh, this pain would be too much. If you can come from this calm energy, this part that's separate, it's not drowning in it, but noticing it, then it has the capacity to help. It has the capacity to help heal any of the pain inside us. That's number one. As I said, number two is just using the language of parts, saying this is a part of me that's triggered. Number three, coming in this non-aggressive or combative way and appreciating that all the parts inside are there for a reason. I can't express how helpful that point is. That any part of you, even if you're not liking it, appreciating and starting to engage with it from this sense of seeing that it's developed, trying to help, so to speak. And we can try to understand it, then you can help it soften. And let me just take another quick few moments, and we'll end very soon, just to give you a few other quick tips of how to work with parts. And we'll run through it really quickly, and then we may do another one. So one way, if you're trying to understand a part, like let's say you have a vigilant part that's driving you crazy, you can never be at peace. You can, when you're in a meditative state, try to connect to that part that's vigilant and ask it, what is it afraid would happen if it wouldn't do its job of being vigilant? So being respectful to it, asking it, what would it maybe is afraid would happen if it wouldn't do its job? And you may get a sense what it'll be like, well, you won't be safe and you might get hurt again, or it might be like that time, such and so in your life when we had to become more vigilant. So that would already be giving you an understanding of it and why it's there. But just by asking it, what would it be concerned to happen for it not to do its job? Another point that can help it is you can ask that part, let's say it's a vigilant part, just ask it to imagine saying, if we were in the perfect, safe environment, would you be okay to soften back just a little, just for a couple moments, not to be as vigilant? And it may say, sure, if it was a perfect, safe environment. Then you can invite it to say, okay, could we try it now? Not for my whole life, not for the rest, but just now, maybe as I'm in my home, as I'm meditating for 3 minutes, could we imagine that we're super safe? And we can maybe not have the vigilance. And you can tell this vigilant part that you see is scared to let go. You can come back after. But would it be okay just for 3 minutes to try to soften back? And you may be surprised to see that there will be a little softening in that. Or let's say, as we said, an emotional numbness part. To ask, say, would it be okay maybe? And again, this is sort of like an inner dialogue. Working with yourself, saying, would it be okay to try to be a little less numb just for 2-3 minutes as I'm breathing or maybe looking at the view? And then telling it to come back to protect you afterwards. But just getting it to soften out of the rigidity can be so healing and allow a shift. And allow a shift that can then help you as you continue to heal with it. I have so many tips, so I'm just going to give you another one. Another quick tip. So you can ask the part, let's say the part that feels you need to be very successful, you need to be vigilant. You can ask it, how old do you think I am? And often it will be so surprising. Oftentimes it might say something like much different than your actual age, oftentimes much younger than your actual age. And you can see that part is operating from this part of seeing you still as a child or a teenager or something that you're not, and you can even update it. You can say, yeah, I hear that, but let me tell you, I'm actually such and such age. And just see what it'd be like to hear that and see if it can soften a little bit when it gets that. The last thing I'll say, when working with exiles, which is where it all starts, that's how we started the live today, talking about how the wounding and the protectors all come from the exiles. Oftentimes, we need professional help for that because that's our deepest wounding. But knowing that the key, oftentimes, is really just being able to feel safe enough to sit with those emotions. Because oftentimes what's needed is if inside there's a young child that's maybe was so scared, or so sad, or so angry, or so depressed, or so hopeless. And that's that core pain. And if we can allow ourselves to touch into that, to connect to it and just let it feel a little seen. Let it feel a little heard. Let it feel less exiled. That helps our whole system be more in harmony. Just allowing your psyche to say, okay, there's a part of me that maybe went through difficulty, part that's pain, and can I come to it with this compassionate place, with this self-energy, just noticing it with curiosity and compassion and just trying to hold space for it. And that can again allow an opening for so much more healing of our core. And then the protectors that need to be so vigilant and need to be so numb or need to be so successful can come because we're able to heal the core wound. And again, it's a process. Doesn't have to be overnight, but just hearing that thought that if we can come to hold some space for that inner pain, or even just hear from it when you connect to it, saying, what is it holding? What did it went through? That can be the beginning of that real deep healing that we're looking for. So I see we're at time and gonna wrap up now, and this was exciting. We got to a lot. There's still more, so I look forward to do continued and being in touch. Again, I want to say my name is Dovid Meshchaninov. I'm a trauma therapist. That's what I specialize in, licensed therapist. I'm based here in LA, but I work with local and long-distance clients. And I really like using all the cutting-edge tools for trauma therapy. So somatic experiencing is something I'm trained in as well. Attachment-focused EMDR, IFS, like we started. And take the time to listen to this. And just to see that oftentimes in the confusing reality of existence and all that we're feeling, this IFS model can begin to give some of a map of how we develop, and that the different parts inside us, and if we can see them and understand them and work with them with kindness and compassion, we can really end coming to a balanced place, a harmonious place, and feeling more unburdened. So I look forward to being in touch with anyone, or follow up any questions if you want. My email is dovidtherapy@gmail.com. Again, that's DOVID therapy@gmail.com, or dovidtherapy.com for my website. And may you all have continued healing and success on your journeys. I look forward to being in touch.